Thank you, Alan, and thanks to everybody for having me back. We had a good time with the District 7 candidates. I'm really pleased to be able to talk with Krista Lane here today for District 6. Sorry that we couldn't have the incumbent with us. I think it would have really been a good conversation. So, but I'm really glad that you're here, Krista. So why don't we kick it off with you telling this group about yourself and why you are running for the council to represent District 6.
Sure. So I'm Krista Lane. I'm running against Mackenzie Kelly, and I am running because I would like a city that works well for all of us. I grew up in Houston. I graduated from Columbia University, spent a decade living between New York City, Boston, and Paris, and then moved back to Austin in 2000, where I became a commercial real estate appraiser. And I spent a few years appraising road and utility and transportation projects. And then I became a multi-housing specialist for CBRE, which is a multinational real estate company that offices downtown. And I spent about a decade appraising primarily housing with some of those other public works projects. Let's see, then I took some time off to be with my family, and the pandemic happened. And this District 6, Northwest Austin, is 90% or more Round Rock ISD. So those are the schools that my kids go to. And we had a couple of school board trustees who had been elected and run as moderates who it turned out were Moms for Liberty that were connected with a lot of very political influences and money from the far right. I'm a very big believer in public schools, basic city services. These should not be political. They should be for everyone. And I really don't want anyone taking my public schools. So instead of going back to work, I organized. And so I organized parents, and we ended up forming a PAC, endorsing 5 school board candidates to run against their slate. We were entirely volunteer-driven across the parent network. We did poll greeting, we did door knocking, we did all the things. And we were outspent 6-1 by money that came from as far away as New York State. Turning Point USA made us a national target for takeover, and all of our candidates won by 15 to 25%. So, felt nice in that little bubble. Asked for a board to step in and take over so I could rest. Got that in place. Those 2 Moms for Liberty that motivated us are still on the Round Rock ISD school board. They're up for election in November. So we'll be pretty mobilized out here along those networks again. But meanwhile, I got redistricted to Mackenzie Kelly, and I did not know a lot about her, but it turns out she's connected to some of those same people. And I really don't want disruption to our city. I care about cities in general. I care about our city here. I moved to District 6 because I wanted to be close to nature and in Austin and connected to the city. I need these things to work, for my community. One thing that I really did through Access Education Round Rock ISD was build a lot of community connections. I know this district well. I've lived here for a decade, and I really just want things to work. My primary platform as I am running here in District 6 is that we need city services that work. In Uri, we were very hard hit with power outages. We have a wastewater lift station that is still not fully functioning since it failed in Uri. We have water mains that break and kids get sent home from school early. And as many of you observed on your way up here, we have a lot of traffic prior to whatever happens with 35, which is gonna back things up even more. We do not have any express service from this side of the district to downtown at all. You can hop on a frequently stopping bus if you would like, or you can drive north to where you can park and take Lakeline Station all the way down. I myself really value multimodal transportation. I have bicycle commuted in Boston and here from my District 6 house to downtown. I see a lot of opportunities to extend those things. We'll talk about some of that around Lakeline Station. But I also really think there are some aspects that are important with recreation. I'm getting too long. And connecting some of what we have what's grown in Austin to what's out here. I'll stop there.
Well, it sounds like that's a really good explication of your coming to Austin and the work you've done. in the community. It sounds like you target your outcomes and look for results, and you pursue them in order to achieve them. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely.
So you're looking for results. Well, along those lines, and this is a question from Friends of Austin Neighborhoods. I don't know if everybody has the questions, but
They don't.
Okay, so I will read this one. I'll read all the questions for you. And I think we're going to look for, what, 2-minute answers? Is that kind of the amount of time that we've got? Okay. Okay. Well, and Zach will kind of give sort of informal notices here. So, Friends of Austin Neighborhoods asks, what is your vision for communities in District 6, and what does a vibrant neighborhood look like to you?
So, my vision for community is connectedness. I do not currently experience District 6 as connected in all the ways it could be. We don't have community gathering places that bring us together. We have an incumbent who has run on creating division. I would like to run on bringing more people together on our common ground and getting things done. That is the number one for me. So out here, it's a very suburban kind of layout, very, car centric. And I would like to see us find more ways to come together in ways that I've seen happening in more central parts of the city, like the wonderful hike and bike trails that have come about. And we could provide some of that. And we have this one library in District 6, which is a great common space, but, kind of build some of that out maybe in the vicinity of Lakeline Station, that sort of thing.
Great. So the vibrance that you're looking for the neighborhood would include more gathering places and more a feel of community, which maybe isn't really the hallmark here at this point, but that would be something to work toward. Movability is asking a question here, and it is our region's roadways. So we're going to talk about transportation now. Our region's roadways are becoming more and more congested, especially with major construction projects like 183 that's underway. What can you do as a council member to increase the number of people who use transit or other shared and active transportation modes in your district, especially to and from Lakeline Station?
Okay, I'll start with talking about Lakeline Station. So Lakeline Station was developed as a transit-oriented development that has, a high concentration of multifamily, higher density housing around it. And the idea of transit-oriented developments is that it facilitates putting less reliance on your car. And so maybe out here that might look like having a 1-car household instead of a 2-car household. But when that was developed, the multifamily that went in was really a suburban style that faced the highways with one-way in and out and fenced. And the station is at the back, but you're walking out onto a highway without a sidewalk and then going around. So it really doesn't accomplish that. It's really for having such a concentration of housing right there, it's pretty close to also retail, a retail center where H Mart is, and all the retail in the area, but there isn't public transportation connecting between the retail and the housing and that Lakeline Station. And so what that does is it just has people still having 2 cars, but they might commute into town, but they'll drive to the station. So I think that one thing around Lakeline Station is looking at ways to connect people differently to that station. So there are opportunities with the Red Line Parkway project to have a hike and bike that goes behind all of those apartment complexes. And then people are finding a more pleasant way to get to the transportation, and they're meeting each other all across all those apartment complexes, adding a little bit of public transportation that can also connect you to the retail. There's also a children's hospital going in that area, which also creates public transportation needs, and it is also not far from Lakeline Station. It also creates the need for more dense housing and different types of housing. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity in that entire area to create multimodal transportation that's also accessible for the families that are going to need to be near the hospital, and connecting in that way. Looking more broadly at the rest of the district, as I already mentioned, we don't have any express service into the centers of town, which doesn't make us feel very connected with town, and it's hard to get in and out. I think there are opportunities to do targeted access to public transportation for people who would be more likely to use it. For example, from the 2 high schools that are in the district, having express connection to the domain and the Kramer station, or to ACC. We also have, throughout the district, we have hike and bike trails that are within neighborhoods that developed as part of that neighborhood, but they're not connected to each other. They're not connected to the network of hike and bike trails that's in Cedar Park, and they're not connected into the city either. And by connecting things like that, we can create really a very nice recreational amenity as well as the transportation benefits.
It's a lot of work to do.
Oh, and I'll tag on one more thing. It's not all about train. You know, we have a park and ride bus station, lots of parking and no express buses.
Yeah.
I mean, that is something that could be added to get people to the Kramer station more easily, as opposed to going up to Lakeline and around and into town.
Yeah, one of the things about sort of the edge parts of Austin is because they're newer into the city, there are services that haven't quite expanded out, and they may, if they are here, they're not as robust. So, and I mean that sincerely. There is a lot of real good opportunity here for the right person in this seat. Farm & City has a question for you. Some Austin City Council members, and actually I think, let's see, I think this one was rewritten. Hang on a second. Yes, it had a little different angle to it. Farm & City, do you support a plan that emerged in 2017 to put Jollyville Road on a road diet to make it a safe, complete street with protected bike lanes? What additional changes, if any, should be made to arterial roads like Jollyville to best serve the needs of D6?
Okay. I do think it is extremely important to have better access for bikes on Jollyville Road than they currently have. It's not safe. And I actually do know families who try to bike places as a family, for example, to get ice cream and that kind of thing, and you have to take that road to get to a lot of these places. And I also used to commute along there, so firsthand experience there. But I think that it's important to consider the needs of this area as well. And I think it is challenging to tell people that when you already have this much traffic congestion and you don't have alternatives to how you get around, to then take away lanes. And so I think it's really critical to provide some solutions for District 6 before talking about taking away more. And I think that the amount of traffic we have right now is an opportunity. While many people will choose not to take express bus service in, if we create that, some people will. And if people start to value it, then they can see better why are we also doing these other things. There was something else I wanted to add on. Let me just see. Oh yeah, and then the other issue I think that is very prevalent in District 6 for every type of road that is above a neighborhood road, but actually even neighborhood roads, is there's a lot of concern with speeding and having ways to safely get around by foot, by bike, any way except your car. And honestly, in some cases, even by car. You know, we have Anderson Mill Road, where it intersects 620, is one of the most congested intersections in the entire city. And we also have recurrent situations with cars crashing into the wall that is someone's yard. It's not safe for the people without the cars or the cars. So I think that we need some more problem solving around making the streets safer in those ways too.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And that would be highly valued.
Yeah. This question talks about safety a little bit more deeply. This is Austin New Liberals. In the last decade alone in Austin, over 450 pedestrians and cyclists have been killed in vehicular accidents. What do you think are the causes of our transportation system's large death toll? What do you think of the city's efforts to improve safety thus far, and where do we go from here?
So, I mean, I'll go shorter on this one because I touched on some of that in the last question. I have definitely seen some cyclist safety projects come in District 6 that I think have been very, very helpful. But I also think that we really could do with a much bigger investment out here. I mean, I just talked about some of the examples of places where there's a lot of car traffic, but this is also a district that is heavily used recreationally by cyclists from around the city. You know, loops that go down 360 and then across Old Spicewood Springs and then up through the neighborhoods. And Old Spicewood Springs is not safe to ride a bike on. I mean, I used to do that route, but I had to stop when I had kids because, I mean, it's very unsafe. And this is something that's prized around Austin that we're known for. And I think there are opportunities to bring some of that into this district and then have people feel more connected.
That sounds good. Let's see. Safe Streets asks this question. In recent years, Austin has seen progressive transportation and streets projects like the Barton Springs Road pilot, the Living Streets program, and building out the all ages and abilities pedestrian, bicycle, and urban trails networks. What are your thoughts on these and other initiatives? And what is your vision for taking Austin's transportation system and streets to the next level in the next few years? And then a second part to that question is part of that vision, which you have been talking about. Do you support Safe Streets Austin's City Leap plan for lane conversions on all Austin-owned arterials to create either bus lanes or protected bike lanes within 5 years?
Okay. So my vision as someone who would be coming to City Council to represent District 6 is to find ways that District 6 values that we can be part of these projects and get better connected to the city. And that includes all the different ways, from public transportation, express service, bikes, all of that. And I've talked a lot about the linkages with bikes, and but what I haven't talked about really specifically is kind of express bus lanes. I think that if we are going to move forward with solutions for District 6, we've got to look at more effective express bus lanes. I mean, we're not going to get train out here anytime soon, and some of the infrastructure is already in place or being built, and so we just need to continue on that path and open it up to people. So I do support that.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm learning some things about District 6, which is really helpful that I wasn't really aware of. Mm-hmm. So this is actually helping inform me, which is kind of interesting.
Interesting, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes, I like to say we don't need everyone to learn about District 6. We just need representation to bring forth the information to act on.
I think that's true. All right, this question is for me. Mm-hmm. We spent 8 years and $8 million on 2 land development code rewrites that included an incredible amount of community engagement, all without much consensus or progress. With a new makeup of council beginning in January 2023, we made significant improvements to the code to meet our housing needs, support transit, and simplify the process. I led on the Home Initiative to add gentle density in neighborhoods so that Austin can remain a home for everyone. Do you support these efforts? And where would you go from here to meet the needs of current and future residents of Austin?
I do absolutely support the addition of gentle density in neighborhoods. I think it's actually something that is very valuable in District 6. We have a lot of multi-generational households here, and housing doesn't really meet those needs very well. And under the existing code, no matter how much money you would want to put into adapting your house, it wouldn't necessarily be possible to do it in a way that's effective. So I think that's actually pretty valuable for our district in that way. I also think that a lot of the neighborhoods in District 6 have deed restrictions and HOAs that preserve the unity that they want in how things look. So I don't think those concerns are really as significant here. I also really support making things more streamlined, consistent across the city, predictable for anyone who's trying to do anything, and less expensive. I mean, it becomes more accessible when it's less expensive. And I really think it's been a good step that we've moved towards one step at a time instead of trying to do everything at once. I don't have strong feelings on what has to be the next step. What I have strong feelings about is we need people in the room to have a conversation who have a background of knowledge and skills and experience in the area to come up with the best solution possible. And that's one of the areas where I do feel that the incumbent falls quite short. She does not know a lot about the real estate development, housing, and transportation, and these are the lion's share of topics before City Council. And if we want to actually solve problems for people, it's not as simple as just pushing something through or pushing back against something. It's understanding what is there, how to improve it, and work with people to make it better for your constituents. And that's what I would like to do.
That's great.
Problem solve.
Rethink 35 has a question.
Mhm.
Do you think I-35 should be expanded? If not, do you support alternative visions like Reconnect Austin or Rethink 35? If I-35 is expanded, do you think the city should pay to build and maintain the Cap and Stitch project, which would cover portions of the highway with public space at the cost of about $700 million to build and $35 million a year to maintain?
So there's what I would think if I was just deciding. And then there's what I think in the world that we live in here in Austin, in the state of Texas, in the United States. And my goal as someone who would be working on city council is to get us to the best possible solution for right now. I'm not trying to get to perfection. I'm trying to get to better than we are now. And by the time I would be in office, we'll be even farther along down that path with 35. I think that this is a time where there are a lot of budget pressures on cities in Texas, and we need to try to use every dollar that we can. If I were deciding, I would strongly prefer that 35 be primarily rerouted around the city to form an outer loop to get all those semis out from the middle of our city, dividing our city and also creating so much pollution, which is even, creates all the ozone action days during, the heat of summer and all of that. But I'm not deciding. And so what I would want to do is make the most use of the money that's coming in as possible. I lived in Boston while the big dig was going on, which, depressed a highway and covered it over with parks. And it is amazing the transformative power of that for the entire city. But that wasn't just funded by the city, and the way that the costs are coming out with the Cap and Stitch, I don't think there is enough diversity of funding sources for it necessarily to be feasible to do that. I mean, that's just the reality for Austin's budget right now as I see it. Having said that, my primary focus is, as I said, really trying to figure out how to have District 6 be better connected and with better transportation. So everything that I see, I always try to look at as an opportunity. And so for me, the opportunity that's presented, if I were representing District 6 as 35 goes under construction, is to really create the opportunity for people who are frustrated about traffic to try other transportation options. Which have to be created first, right? Because we don't have them right now. But.
And that goes back to an earlier question, which is how would you urge people to get out of their cars and take different types of transportation?
And that reminds me too. I think that, the way to get people to do that when they don't have the habit is to have them find one thing that they would really like to do that would be more enjoyable if they did it outside of their car. So if that's going with your family to the ice cream shop, that's what that is. If it's not having to drive an hour back and forth to downtown, that's what it is. But everyone being able to find something. For a lot of families here, that something is getting to and from school without having to sit in a car line for 30 minutes on each end. And there are many schools out here that do not have very safe ways to and from school. So I really think it's about finding targeted opportunities to open up a possibility that people will value. So, and not deciding for them what that is.
Right, just giving them the options so they can make that decision.
Yep.
Ara's question is next. In 2020, Austin voters overwhelmingly supported Project Connect at the ballot box. With supply chain and inflation constraints, the first phase of light rail construction has narrowed. Opponents to rail have challenged ATP in court, and the threat at the state legislature continues. What are your thoughts on the current state and future of Project Connect?
I think that the unbelievable levels of inflation couldn't be predicted at the time that this passed. And it did pass, and it was important to revise the plan and try to get something to happen. And I think that's basically where we're still at. Money has been allocated, there are obstacles, but at whatever point we can do something, we need to. I mean, and we need a more mature public transportation system in Austin, and we need a big infusion of money and resources in order to do that. So I support that. But what I would want to see as much as possible anytime something is revised in that way is making sure that all parts of the city are feeling a benefit from it, because it's much easier to divide the city against these projects when people can't see how it's helping them, you know? And so it's really a very kind of pragmatic, how do we bring ourselves together and all, you know, be on the same team? And I do think that got lost in the current format of Project Connect.
Gotcha.
So,
this question is from Sunrise ATX. Austin's population continues to grow. In fact, it doubles every 20 years. Austin Energy will need to balance the sometimes competing interests of increasing energy capacity, reducing carbon emissions, and keeping per-user costs down. What initiatives can we pursue on a system-wide and per-home basis to ensure we can meet the needs of our citizens, our climate, and our future?
So I got distracted by something I forgot to say in the previous question. So I was not listening very
Do you want to go
closely.
ahead and address
I really would love to, if that's
Go
okay.
for it. Go for it.
So something else that I think is really critical for the success of Project Connect is being able to build ridership. And how do we build ridership? Is it really entirely from, for example, at the Crestview station, people walking and biking over and hopping on from Crestview? Or is it from recognizing the needs of people who live farther out, who've been displaced by high housing costs, who have these cars that are costing them a lot of money, and figuring out ways to connect them to that network? So I really think that's a critical piece of the success of Project Connect as well, is when it got revised smaller, building in the connections that will really bring the whole city and also the outlying areas, because people have gotten pushed outside of the city too. And I wanted to add that on.
Well, and I would say on that, what gets lost in some of the press accounts, because they're maybe reporting on what the critics want them to report, they're acting like it's just the light rail line. The rest of Project Connect was not affected, and the rolling stock continues to be part of the plan. And the thing is the costs to build the light rail got so expensive. Like, if your budget isn't going to be able to, if your revenues coming in isn't going to be able to meet what your budget needs are, you're going to pare things down and kind of fit what your budget is, right? And that's what ATP, the city, and Cap Metro were trying to do with changing the initial lines for the light rail. Doesn't mean it's not going to eventually go out to the airport. We all want it to go out to the airport. It's just not in the initial plan. And so that really provides a lot of opportunity and promise for folks in District 6, because things are still in the plan that will support the work you're doing. And I can tell you, as Vice Chair of Cap Metro, they're working really hard to get to the edges of, and I mentioned kind of the edge of the city earlier, to get out to the newer parts of the city of Austin, to bring them in that embrace. And that is a real desire of the policymakers and the governing board at Cap Metro, of my colleagues there. But to go back to Austin Energy,
Yes.
so the cost of our, so the carbon emissions, we want to keep them down. It's expensive. The whole infrastructure is quite costly, as is for Austin Water. So what initiatives do you think we could pursue on a system-wide and per-home basis with Austin Energy to ensure we meet the needs of our citizens, our climate, and our future?
So I think one of the biggest impacts to carbon emissions would be closing the Fayette power plant and working with LCRA to get the whole thing to gradually shut down. I also think that it's critical to open up ways that people can live closer to where they work and where they play, or be able to connect to transportation and take them there. I mean, these are the big things in my mind. So multimodal transportation.
And we need some help from the state.
I mean, it would be nice.
Because they actually govern how we operate. So the city of Austin has its system, but ERCOT, we have to sell the power that we create. onto the grid, onto the system, and then we have to buy it back. And it's actually like a stock market at Austin Energy. If you can go in and see how they're buying and selling energy futures. It's really fascinating stuff. And so we are kind of prisoners of this statewide system, but at the same time, we have big plans and we care about the climate and the cost to our residents. So we're trying to we want predictability, reliability, we want lower costs, and then we want to make sure that the carbon emissions work with all our alternative sources of fuels are robust to meet what the citizens of Austin want from us, which is alternative fuels and not the dirty fuels. So that is a very complex and technical kind of work, and the longer you work in that arena, the more you understand about it. And this is a tough question, really, unless you've been on the council to kind of understand the stuff that's been going on, including with Fayette.
Well, and what I was thinking as you were saying that is, I basically bring to this ideas that come out of District 6 and then also my professional and life experience. But I bring it as part of a conversation and for me to learn and how it all fits together.
There's a lot of complications. There are a lot of statewide actors trying to affect our decision making and trying to thread the needle, which is exactly what you're talking about. How do you find that compromise or that middle road in order to keep the progress moving forward? Yes.
And so something that's important to me is that I like to take action. Okay. I feel that many of the issues that are before us now have been before Austin for a very long time. I've certainly been giving decades of thought to some of them. And I like to not get things into a political sphere, but instead just figure out what are the common goals and what are the actions we can take now to move forward. So.
Yeah, that's good. This question, and I think we have two more questions. This one is from Environment Texas. With the Highland Lakes currently 44% empty, and I need to check that number to see if we filled it up a little bit with all the rain. Our water supply is increasingly at risk with climate change. Yet a third of Austin's water is spent watering lawns. City Council has approved policies like Water Forward to protect and conserve water. Part of the implementation plan for Water Forward includes limits on the amount of irrigation allowed in new homes or businesses. Do you support these measures? And what other policies would you consider to safeguard the water needs of our growing population?
I do support this type of thing. In general, I mean, I can understand that there are often reasons to make something apply only to the new homes and businesses, but in general, I think we want to move towards having things apply consistently across our city. So if we were to approach it in that way, I would want there to be a timeline attached to making it apply to everyone. Water supply is really important. Obviously, I'm stating the obvious. In Williamson County, there are some pretty significant issues going on already. Even if you look at kind of the Georgetown area, there are parts that have much more severe limitations on water use than other parts of Georgetown. And I think it's important to, 60% of District 6 is in Williamson County. I think it's important to look at the lessons that are playing out before us there and bring them into the discussions as much as possible. And it's obviously critical to secure a better water supply. Some of that's happening, that work is happening on a regional basis, which is great. For example, having an underground reservoir outside of town, I support that sort of thing. And I think that getting better about reusing water is really, really critical. And there are a lot of different ways that that can play out, but I would say that that's a very high priority moving forward. I mean, we've already, since I moved here in 2000, xeriscaping was, an initiative and all of that, but getting more effective at water reuse, I feel like, is where we need to be now.
We have this weird dichotomy in Austin, drought and flood. And we have to be, we have to have the posture to address both of them. So this last question is timely. We are looking at the fiscal 25 city budget. What major topics are you focused on in the proposed fiscal 25 budget? What thoughts do you have about the process this year, including consideration for spending 2 years ahead?
The most important thing to me is efficiency and effectiveness of city services, and that goes across a lot of different, zones. If we're talking about housing and transportation, we can talk about the Development Services Office as an example, or the permitting office. In development services, I read the McKinsey report, and I think that staff tends to stay for 18 months, and it takes them 16 months to learn their job. That tells you a lot right there. It also tells you a lot about the complexity of what's going on with the processes there. I think it's really important to make development services, permitting, code enforcement to, on a process level, make them more efficient and predictable. It will save staff time. It will make them more efficient. It will help building happen. It will help even, like schools that have something that's damaged. They need a permit to get it fixed and inspected and all of that. It'll help our utilities too, actually. There's a permitting component of that as well. That's really important to me. I think that in District 6, 911 response time is really a critical issue. There are concrete examples of it taking 45 minutes for a fire truck to reach the fire that's half a mile from the station. So there's some issues with efficiency that need to go on, that need to be addressed. And that's where my heart lies in all this, is just helping things work better. And there are a lot of pressures on revenue for cities right now, so it's just one more reason to find those opportunities.
Well, that's the end of the questions. Elam, I thought I would give Krista a chance to close. And then, because we have some additional time, maybe kind of just you can wander around and people can come up and ask you questions that maybe we didn't cover here. Would that work?
Sounds great.
All right. So, Krista, why don't you take us out? Give us your closing remarks.
So I never expected to run for city council, actually never expected to do anything political. But I watched what happened after Uri in District 6, what we went through in this area with power outages, what we've gone through with utilities and with the wastewater lift station that's not repaired. And I just feel that we need better here. And I'm watching what's happening with housing getting politicized and moving away from problem solving that we all need. And I just want to be a force for positive change. Currently, I am the only challenger to the incumbent, Mackenzie Kelly. And I have not found a lot of action and effective problem solving to come out of her term. And so I would hope for as much support as anyone would give me to help move things forward for our city. If you want to know more about me, I have cards, and there are a bunch of them up there. You're welcome to take one to find my website and get connected. Thank you so much for coming.